Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody. That is hopefully for somebody. My name is Cal Naranya, and welcome to episode 143. This is going to be a little bit different than normal. If you are listening to this day of release, hello, I hope you are doing well. Good morning on Monday. If you're listening to this any other time, hello, I hope you have a splendid evening, day, or afternoon, or potentially your day has just started. You can probably hear it by the sound of my voice. I am fighting through allergies and a cold because, climate change will do that to you. This episode is going to be special because there's going to be two reviews, but both are spoiler-filled just because of the amount of energy that I have. I did not want to miss releasing an episode on our regular scheduled release time, that being 12 a.m. on Monday. And so because of that, there will be a spoiler-filled review of Suits LA, and now we know it's the only season of this show. And I saw a movie as well, which is Fight or Flight, starring Josh Hartnett. Time codes for both sections will be listed in the description, so no need to worry. Let's jump into my review of Suits LA.
What'll it be, boys?
We're gonna have 2 Guinness and Eddie, whatever you want.
No, we're not gonna drink that cheap crap that you like. We're here to celebrate you getting your head out of your ass and pitching us into the playoffs.
I feel like I just got insulted and complimented at the same time.
Harvey Specter, nice to meet you. McCallan, 25, 3 of them.
Hey, Eddie doesn't need that.
Yes, he does. Eddie, it is the smoothest drink you'll ever taste.
Harvey, he'd be happy with pineapple juice from across the street.
I want the smoothest drink you ever taste.
See? Eddie gets it.
Eddie, you don't even like beer.
Suits is an interesting exploration of ratings and streaming. I did watch the show when it was airing live on, what was it even on? Was it TBS? What was its original? No, USA Network. And I watched all 9 seasons, thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a show that was popular when I was in post-secondary. And then over the 2023 release year, did massive numbers on Netflix and Peacock. And I've been sitting with this a lot as I've watched the 11 episodes of the second spinoff. I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this if you watch the show specifically on Netflix, but there was a spinoff with Jessica Pearson called Pearson, which ran for 1 season. It was all about her adventures in Chicago dealing with municipal politics and whatnot. Suits LA being another spinoff, of course, now only running for 1 season. We know it's been canceled. Aaron Korsh, to me, is a very interesting showrunner because Suits is a very specific show. And when looking at all of the parts for Suits, the more I've thought about it, it was impossible to make a spinoff of this show. And that is because what worked about Suits was how specific all of the functioning parts of that machine, all the cogs, were in how they how they worked together to make what worked about that show. The whole concept of somebody with a photographic memory who is not a law student working at a law firm with a hotshot lawyer in the midst of a lot of white-collar law, financial law, and all that stuff, copyright law, all those things that were in the show. They covered, obviously, a substantial amount, and a big focus, of course, of the show was Mike not getting found out. And there's a lot in there that is so specifically tied to Suits. Suits LA, I give Aaron Korsh a lot of credit for this, which is he attempts to do something wholeheartedly different with setting it up in LA. Of course, you have to pick another major city. So what do? You go to arguably the entertainment capital of the world, with Los Angeles focusing on an entertainment lawyer. And I actually think a lot of the setup for the first episode of the season is automatically different in a way that still feels familiar, which is the first episode, and full spoilers for all 12 episodes in this season, which is having Ted Black and his relationship with Stewart fall apart in the midst of this merger, a firm that was entertainment and criminal defense, and Stewart's character actually undercutting the merger and stealing all of the best employees from Ted Black, Stephen Amell's character, could have made for a really interesting dynamic where you had these two law firms duking it out the whole season. One of my favorite elements of Suits, the original show, is, of course, they handled case-to-case issues, and it was a procedural in that sense, but also there was a season-wide arc that usually built up through the show, whether that was hiding Mike's lawyer status, or Daniel Hardman coming back in, or a case that they had to focus on for most of the season. Suits LA doesn't really seem to pay the same attention to one specific storyline. It seems to hop back and forth, focusing on the day-to-day, which of course you would, and the entertainment aspect of it does feel different, but you do not have the dynamic that we are so used to from Suits OG, which is that Mike and Harvey relationship. I think Ted Black is a fun enough character, and his history as a prosecutor, again, was a really interesting character to see him on such different sides of the lawyer spectrum. And I appreciated the flashbacks we get to really understand his relationship with the judicial system and him trying to put away Pellegrini. And that element, I think, not being a major focus, just sort of popping in and out, would have suited the show really well to show him being on the other side of the defense attorney purpose, which is about half of the season, where because we hopped around so much, I didn't really know which part of the story I was supposed to care the most about, where Ted as a character, and one of the reliances this show does, which I do think is a mistake, was automatically, without seeming significant to the season as a whole, we got way too much of the original Suits cast. Harvey shows up in at least 3 episodes. We had a Daniel Hardman cameo, and then we had Lewis show up in the finale. And Stewart's dealing with David Bowie, and that kind of being the culmination of the end of the season, where he goes to an anger management location where he meets Lewis, and the back and forth between them is entertaining. I think it fails to capture any of the specific reasons people liked Suits. I was talking to friends and family about this show, and a lot of people felt very disinterested very quickly because capturing that specificity of what worked about Suits is impossible to do again. I think this show was doomed to fail because of what people think of when they think of Suits. Having Ted Black as our stand-in for Harvey is fine given his dynamic is still very familiar, where we know Harvey worked in the DA's office before he wound up joining Pierce and Hardman, and giving Ted Black he was a federal prosecutor and then jumping to the entertainment side, a lot of the similarities, and I can see why when they were creating that character thought that would work, but he doesn't have a mic. We have Rick back and forth, which is fine. He's an okay character, and that dynamic he has with Erica of the will they won't they is a conception of any drama or comedy that of course you are going to expect because you need that to drive the plot forward. But outside of that, a lot of the supporting cast, there's no Donna in this show. You're not able to really do that. I think Maggie Grace's character, again, as Amanda Stevens, has a will they won't they with Ted as well, not to mention his past love interest, who is now running a firm as well in LA. I almost said the United States. Of course, the whole show was in the United States. And because of the show's failure to kind of grasp what makes it special on its own, it winds up being at least I found, and the people I've spoken to, you wind up being disinterested because the scripts aren't as snappy. It's trying to capture that feeling you had from watching Suits OG, but you don't have the same commitment because you're not following along specifically with Mike Ross, who is hiding this secret. Similar to, and I've compared both of these shows for ridiculous reasons, but they do have a similarity, which is that Dexter and Mike Ross are trying to hide a secret because they are committing a crime. Obviously, the scale of which they are doing so is a different momentum because of their jobs. But Mike being found out is a tension that you feel throughout the entire show. And of course, spoilers for later on in that show until he's officially discovered. But this doesn't have that, where the criminal cases are people we don't know. We're meeting them for the first time and we're supposed to care. And a lot of these relationships are pre-established and we don't really have an entry-level character like Mike was in the Pearson Hardman world. Everybody working in this world has already experienced it. There's not a new hire. They try to capture that with Erica's assistant, and she's okay. I thought Leah was all right, but that character doesn't seem to be vital to the whole story. And unfortunately, specifically on network television, which is how this show was released, this wasn't a Peacock original. For whatever reason, it was a Sunday NBC release. And then if you're here listening in Canada, it was on Crave. There's not a momentum to keep watching throughout the whole season. And it's unfortunate because I was looking forward to this. This officially is just a Suits spinoff, but it winds up making me wonder, and this is not a criticism of Aaron Korsh as a writer, but more specifically, everything about Suits, the original series, you can't recreate it because people are going to say, well, this is just completely derivative of the original. And doing something that does feel in the same world, but doesn't capture that same feeling, as I said already, was never going to work. It is similar. It's not like, as an example, How I Met Your Mother trying to flip that situation and making it How I Met Your Father, giving the female perspective on the dating world in the 21st century, specifically in the 2020s. This is another law show that just happens to be in the world of Suits. We know what Harvey's doing and we know what Lewis is doing, and we get a flashback with Daniel Hardman. And I understand some people probably enjoyed seeing those cameos and establishing where they were or where they are now, and that's fun. I like seeing those people that I liked from the 9th season of Suits, but Suits LA doesn't establish its own identity firm enough to be its own show, and relying on those cameos so early into the show's run, I think, was a crutch. And it's unfortunate because this was a double-edged sword where Aaron Korsh couldn't do something wholly original, and he couldn't just copy the dynamic of the show to begin with because of what Suits is. And it's fine. The show wasn't insultingly bad, but it was just another example of the possibility of one show only working because it was so many Venn diagrams that you couldn't take pieces out, similar to maybe a Jenga tower, and it was doomed to collapse on itself. And because of that, we wind up with another project, unfortunate for Stephen Amell, that doesn't last very long. Heels is a show I quite enjoyed, but Suits LA is no more. If you did watch Suits LA and you liked it or you didn't, I'd love to hear about why. You can comment directly on this episode on YouTube and Spotify, or you can @FilmReelist on any of the social media. Now let's jump into the feature film review, which is spoilers only for Fight or Flight.
All good?
Quite fit, but
You're making it work.
can you please do something with this? I don't have a place to put it, do I?
You cannot just walk around this plane with a gun.
Fight or Flight, which was directed by James Madigan, not somebody I believe he's a first-time director. He doesn't have a wiki, so that is my assumption. But it stars Josh Hartnett as well as Katie Sackhoff, and then a lot of people who have worked within the stunt industry. And this movie's amazing. I absolutely adored it. The best way that I would sell Fight or Flight, it's not a movie that had massive marketing. It was not in every theater around me. I actually had to go outside of my city to go and see it, which was totally fine. It is the best equivalent for somebody who enjoyed Bullet Train, taking that dynamic of action movie in a crowded space where there is only so much room, things are trapped, and you can't just get off or stop the method of transportation. It is wildly entertaining. It earns its R rating. In terms of taking somebody known for the dramatic and putting them in a John Wick style action movie. I could understand why some people are potentially turned off by that. We already had a film that you could categorize in that nature that I also reviewed already with Novocaine and Jack Quaid. I was watching hockey before I started recording this today. Can you tell? And for that, I'm really grateful because Josh Hartnett is somebody who more recently has been popping up in other movies. Of course, he was in Oppenheimer and then Trap, and now this. Really getting to see, we know that this man is so talented and has a wild amount of range, but getting him in one of these movies, I thought was absolutely brilliant. What works so well about his character in this of Lucas Reyes is it takes elements of people we're familiar with. I would say this is akin to a John McClane, but more at the end of Die Hard with a Vengeance, where you're taking this character who is complete wreck, and honestly, probably some people would describe as a waste of space, and he is the last person that you would think to reach out to help solve this mission, which is there is an organization, we find out who they are later, it's just some sort of tech company, and there is a hacker who has developed technology that can break into any system. She's also been responsible, and it's full spoilers, for stealing money from child labor camps and sweatshops because she is somebody who grew up in this, but her identity is completely anonymous. People don't know who she is or they are at the time, but they do know that that person known as the Ghost is on this plane. Little does Lucas Reyes know until later, and this is in the trailers, that the plane is full of assassins also trying to kill that person and get their money back. So it is taking similar elements from familiar other films, but placing it in a different setting. And it's not Snakes on the Plane because that's an action movie that was Samuel L. Jackson, and obviously the bit is the snakes on the plane. But this has action. And a lot of the choreography having to be in confined spaces, dealing with the objects that you have on the plane. I liked Bullet Train, and I like David Leitch's projects, and this having one of the producers from John Wick, which quite frankly, I don't know how much that sways with the marketers or the general audience, but overall, I was wildly entertained by this. I think Josh Hartnett's almost unhinged performance in a John McClane-esque fashion where the guy is just falling apart, still capable as a fighter, but losing some of these fights, getting injured himself, having to constantly have to protect this person, finding out it's one of the flight attendants, which I think is a brilliant cover because you would be traveling all over the world and have opportunities of downtime in a bunch of different foreign countries. And the setup for that, the twists aren't necessarily shocking, but what Novocaine and Fight or Flight prove to me is that there still is a place for these original action movies, and there is a substantial difference between these two films made for the big screen. And Accountant I wouldn't include in that, even though I reviewed that a couple weeks ago, where these movies deserve the big screen treatment. They are not blurry, they are not incohesive messes, which we've got with a bunch of Netflix original action movies. A trailer for a sequel for that might have come out last week. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up The Old Guard. There's a reason what is it called? Not Celestial. I don't even remember. There's a show. What was it called? It had Richard Madden in it, and I can't remember what it is called. Not Game of Thrones. He had it started with a C word. That makes it sound like it's a curse word, but it is not. Amazon Prime spy show. I watched this. What was it? Citadel. I was not going to come up with that word. But Fight or Flight has unique action. It has a setting that everybody is familiar with, while not necessarily first class, because some of the elements of that are, it's on a jumbo jet plane, or I believe they're called a big bus. I've never been on a plane this large, so I wouldn't necessarily know how to function on one. But in those crammed spaces, dealing with the objects you have around you, which you could argue has become kind of a norm of these action films, but there still is creativity in this. And when you have a compelling actor like Josh Hartnett, who is constantly playing this guy who's losing his energy, there's not a oneer, or at least hiding to be a wonder, like, look at this incredible thing we did. It's just action beat after action beat. The comedy is oh my goodness, I'm very, very sorry. So eloquently portrayed, where the absurdity of the situation continually becomes more and more elevated. And for that, it's so fun to watch. There's a chainsaw fight sequence that is absolutely ridiculous. And it's funny enough because my wife was asking me, I'm watching The Pit with her, even though I've seen it all already. And I don't do well with medical. I don't even want to classify it as violence, but I guess it would classify, but medical violence, I don't appreciate, but the cartoonish elements of this are wildly entertaining. It's only an hour and a half, which I really appreciate. And there's a momentum through each of the fight sequences that fill a fairly generic 3-act structure. But as I've said on multiple reviews for this show, I look at a film for what it's trying to do. I'm not going to compare this to a massive movie or something that is aiming to be more critically approved in the Oscar bait genre. But making these really well effective, choreographed, fun to watch B-action movies on the big screen, I miss this era. We used to get a lot more of these, and it's unfortunate that for the most part they've been pushed to streaming. So if you are looking for a movie to see that scratches an entirely different itch than a lot of what we are going to be getting lately, which is more and more recognizable intellectual properties, and that's not to say I'm not looking forward to them. I am for some of them, but a movie that's just really entertaining to watch with a star that I think should be in more things. You may not know this, but Josh Hartnett was supposedly the actor that Christopher Nolan was looking for in Batman Begins, but it never wound up happening, which is unfortunate because I think he would have been incredible in that. And maybe this is a film that Josh Hartnett, who's been much more of a dramatic actor, shows, hey, I can do this, and he winds up in one of these big brands or franchises that we like so much. So I would love to see that. I think the dynamic between Josh Hartnett's character and Ghost is really fun. His entire relationship with Katie Sackhoff, which is just over the phone, is fun. There's a little mystery in this that's not overly shocking in terms of its predictability, but for a brisk 97-minute action film on an airplane, I had a grand time, didn't have to look at my watch, enjoyed all of the fun choreography in different parts of the airplane. It is worth your time. If you don't wind up going to the theater, I do understand, but you need to watch this when it hits streaming, because this is the kind of movie that would be so much fun with a group of friends enjoying the absurdity of the circumstances. So you should check this out, and I would be amiss if I didn't tell you to watch it. So that is my review for Fight or Flight. Now let's jump into listener mail and question of the week responses.
Can I ask you a question? Just fun?
There's something I've been meaning to ask you.
I ask the questions, you answer the questions.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it.
Last week's question of the week is, what do you think is the best TV spinoff? It was supposed to be connected to Suits LA, and obviously we know how that went. Scotty Cameron writes in, there's only one correct answer, and it's Star Trek The Next Generation. Let's be real, it introduced a new Enterprise crew that managed to be just as iconic as the original Enterprise crew. As a non-Star Trek fan, Scotty, I would push back on that. I know some of them, just off the top of my head. Obviously, I know Jean-Luc Picard. I don't even know the name of his number one, if he has a real name. Riker, is that his name? And then Data, and I can't remember the name of. See, I like Star Trek, and I'm having a hard time, so I'm gonna need you to explain that more, maybe in your next YouTube novel. What do we have here? It expanded the Star Trek lore immensely and gave us new factions like the Borg and the Qs. The big thing Star Trek The Next Generation accomplished was it was the spin-off series that improved on Star Trek the original series in every conceivable way. The movies is the only field where the original series beats the next generation on. What is his name? I'm now mad that I can't remember what it was. Data. Oh, yeah, Worf. I've had to look these up. This is part of the problem for me. What was his name? I am mad at myself for not being able to remember this character's name. Georgie LaForge. That was the one that I was having a hard time coming up with. Okay. Dylan Pollock writes in, okay, now that I've heard someone say Walton Goggins is in an Avengers movie, hell yeah, Goggins. The movie tariff thing would be devastating for the movie industry. Agreed. I don't really want to talk about that again. And then what do we have here? The best TV spinoff and my favorite, I think I'd say, is Frasier. Not that many great ones, I think. Oh, and technically The Simpsons is a spinoff of the Tracy Ullman Show, so changing my answer to that. Okay, thank you, Dylan, very much. 5 Ooper 8 Edel says, well, technically The Simpsons is a spinoff series. Yoink, I'm using that one. Also, Fiona and Cake. I say a lot of things. 5 Ooper 8 Edel. You're going to have to tell me this week what you're talking about. Thanks for the pod. Have a nice week. Oh, I appreciate that so much. And then Mason writes in, Better Call Saul, obviously best show ever. That's really interesting. My personal answer, people are going to argue that it's not the best, but the reason I'm going to suggest this is because of the iconography of the actor playing that role, which is The Flash was a spinoff off of Arrow, and it has been said that Grant Gustin is Christopher Reeve equivalent of Superman, given the fact that he was that character for 9 seasons, 10 years if you include his appearances in the Arrow. So I'm going to say Flash. And then Keen Machine, I missed your question so much, and I'm sorry for this, which was, I don't have an answer to your question of the week since I opt out of the loop for Marvel content these days, but I've heard Thunderbolts gets good reviews, so that's good. What are you most looking forward to this summer? Keen, apologies for missing your question. That is a great answer or question, and this is one of the things I've said multiple times, so if you've missed it, no need to worry about that, which is, if you don't have an answer for question of the week, please send one in to me because I will answer it, because I like to hear what the listeners have to say as well as what they would like to know about me. The thing I like to do most in the summer is spending time with my kids. It's more often than not that's when my wife can also get time off work, which means we can go doing fun things, camping, all sorts of explorations of different things, visiting friends who we don't get to see during the school year. So that's what I'm most looking forward to. Thank you to everybody who submitted their answers to the question of the week. If you would like to answer the question of the week, you can always email the podcast, filmreelistspod@gmail.com. You can comment below on YouTube and Spotify, or you can answer the social media post for question of the week, which usually goes up on Thursdays, or you can @filmreelist any time of the week. Just make sure to include the hashtag QOTW. This week's question of the week is going to be controversial, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what the listeners have to say, which is, what is your favorite part of Star Wars that has been negatively responded to? That may be really long-winded, which is Andor season 2 is going to be the review of next week's episode of the podcast. I've been sitting on the entire season for quite a while, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how people react to the final 3 episodes, which, if you're listening to this on release date, come out tomorrow. That's more to say there's a lot of elements of Star Wars that have been critically panned. So outside of the original, no, I'm going to rephrase this. I'm on the fly. Apologies for this. Outside of the original trilogy of Star Wars, what is your favorite Star Wars project? Is it one specific show? Is it a movie from either the sequels or the prequels? So that's my question. Outside of the Star Wars original trilogy, what is your favorite Star Wars project? I've already told you all the different ways you can answer to that, and I'd like to read some podcast reviews that I have now on Apple Podcasts. If you do rate the show, I will read them, even if they are funny. So this one says, friend from work, Courts 71234567890. Kyle is a friend from work who talks a lot about movies, seems to know what he's saying. Thank you so much for that. And then this one is from Carl No More, entry level. Kyle showed up on Jump on the Batwagon. Oh, okay. After his multiple appearances, I decided to check it out. Film Realist is a great down-to-earth podcast that covers a lot of the most popular stuff. Thank you, Carl and Courts, for your reviews. The reviews on Apple Podcasts do really help the show get into more threads and algorithms, which will allow me more opportunities to see other things and react to it more actively and more recently to when it releases. I know it's been interesting with the Disney Plus stuff because I have seen all of Daredevil and Andor, but this upcoming week does not have a major release that I'm interested in, so I thought it would be good to give more people an opportunity to see all of Andor if they're waiting till the whole thing drops. So as I've said already in this episode, Andor Season 2 will be the review of next week's episode. Please consider leaving a follow and a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. If you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It helps the show. We're slowly crawling towards monetization on YouTube, which would be absolutely incredible, and I appreciate each and every listen that this show does get. My name is Kyle Naranya, and I will see you next time.